Hey everyone, today we're going to focus on creating our database using Code First Entity Framework in ASP.NET Core and for your passion project. And so in a prior video that I will link, I showed how to use ChatGPT, which is a really good tool to help you brainstorm a database diagram called an ERD. So you can kind of read my prompt here to kind of see what I did in another video. And then in that video, I used a tool to draw the database diagram called Draw.io, and it's in Visual Studio to generate this database diagram. Nonetheless, the tool for brainstorming was ChatGPT. It helped me come up with these different tables. Why that's a good tool is because these problems have been solved before. And so that's what ChatGPT and similar tools are great at, is regurgitating problems that have already been solved. And so there's not really a downside that I see to helping you brainstorm your ERD. Now, again, it kind of comes up with a summary of all these different tables and all these different relationships. Now, the final product that I wound up with was very similar to this. Now I've updated this, which is why I'm kind of mentioning I've updated my ERD to show something that I left out. And these were the different tables that I had. Now the main thing that I want to show off in this passion project is that I can work with the different kinds of relationships in a normalized database, more specifically the one-to-manys and the many-to-manys. And so when you're looking at this diagram, when you see the two hash marks here, this means one and only one user can have zero. So a user can have zero or many orders. Okay, so this is a one-to-many relationships between my user and orders. So one user can have many orders. I updated my user table because in .NET Core we're actually going to create a class called application user that inherits from identity user. Now, what that's going to allow us to do is use the built-in identity system with username and password and login controls and all this kind of fun stuff that I will show in this video or a future video. But we're going to inherit from identity user, that's the colon, and add a list of orders. And so in this UML diagram, you could see that on the one side of the relationship, I added a list of orders because a user has a list of orders, and there is not a list of orders in the built-in identity user. That's why we have to inherit from identity user and add that property to the application user. And you can see that trend if you follow through the diagram, the one-to-manys on the one side. So an order is full of items, so order items. So one order has many one or many order items. And so you can see on the one side I have a list of order items. Now, I say it's a list. That is a C# collection. There are many C# collections. And so when I actually code this out, I kind of leave that, I abstract that. Instead of saying it has to be a list, I actually say anything that is a collection. So nonetheless, it doesn't have to be a list. It could be other collections. And you'll see that in my code. Same thing here. A product will be on many order items. And so a product is on the one side, has many order items as well. So a list of order items goes in product. Now, so there's one-to-manys, and that's like 1, 2, 3 examples of one-to-many relationships. I also had a many-to-many relationship, and I want to point that out, and that's between products and ingredients. And I'm just highlighting the ERD before I get into the code. I'm about to get into the code. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to create the database, we're going to create the tables, and we're even going to seed some data for all of these or many of these tables. So it is a product. Now, since I'm making a Mexican restaurant, my products are my food, my entrees, my beverages, my appetizers, right? These are the food products and drink products and alcohol, whatever you want it to be. So a product has many ingredients, and an ingredient, call it, an ingredient can be, salt or whatever. An ingredient can go in many products. So that's your many to many relationship. And as you could see here, and that's just like a key thing to remember in database design, is that if you have a many to many, you break it down. You do not keep many to manys. A many to many gets broken down, and you introduce a new table. And this new table, it's often called a join table, so that a product has many product ingredients. So that's a one to many between product and product ingredient. And an ingredient has many product ingredients. And so this is a normal part of breaking down a many to many relationship. That's not considered good database design. Introducing a join table in between the two tables that have that many to many. Okay. And then category has a one to many to product. And so this is my database ERD. This is the application. I'll be creating the application in this video around this database design. But of course, it starts off with creating the database itself. So let's start up Visual Studio. Visual Studio Community 2022. You should have the ASP.NET template installed. So if you have the right template installed, you should be able to create a new project and create an ASP.NET Core Web App. And you can select it on the right-hand side right here, or if it's in your recents right here. And where you store this application is up to you on your hard drive. I'm kind of making this a restaurant, and it's going to be a Mexican restaurant. We're just going to call it Tequila's, right? Mexican restaurant name. Okay, Tequila's restaurant, that's fine. And this is going to be an e-commerce. Now, I'm a fan here at this point of choosing individual accounts. That's going to wire up a lot of functionality for bringing in user accounts, logins, and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and choose individual accounts, and I'll show you how to work with these accounts as we go through this video. So I am going to change the authentication type. And this, when you choose that, it does a lot of additional things for you. It does additional things for you in your templated code. So kind of the code it gives you out of the box. There's a few extra things. And the first thing I will show you in app settings is your database name. And so it kind of wires up a database. And this is the database name by default. It's a randomized named, obviously. So I'm going to start just by naming this database something else. I'm just going to call it Tequila's Restaurant DB. That makes sense to me versus some random database name. I'm also going to point out this is using local DB, which is a version of SQL Server, a free version. And that's where we're going to start, just by renaming our database. Now, the next thing we're going to do, this is code first entity framework. So we're going to start by creating our models, our C# models. And by creating the models, that will allow us to then create the database name Tequila's Restaurant. So let's close app settings. Let's close that overview. And for now, I'm just going to pin this Solution Explorer. And it's also, let's open up off of the view. Let's open up our SQL Server Object Explorer and kind of keep this over here on the left. This is where our database is going to be. So let's keep that hanging out on the left. Now under models, there's not much going on. But I will point out under data, we do have a database context. And so because we chose to kind of work with identity, you notice here our DB context is inheriting from identity DB context. And so that's something that's nice with this template. It already includes a context, and you're already bringing in entity framework, right? So if I go into my dependencies, we already have a lot of dependencies brought in, which is SQL Server Entity Framework, SQL Server, and Entity Framework tools. And so a lot of the code examples I've done in the past, I've had to bring in these packages kind of more manually, but this is already here for us. It's also bringing in identity, an identity for Entity Framework. So there's a lot that's kind of, again, wired up for you out of the box. That's quite nice. Now, where we can go from here, we're going to start creating our models. And so kind of going back to our UML diagram, these are the tables that will be generated from our models. And so, you know, we can kind of start with the first one, which is application user. And so let's add a C# class. This is going to be called application user. And there's really not a whole lot to do here other than inherit from identity user. Whoops. Now, identity user needs to be brought in to be recognized, so control dot, and we're going to add this using statement up at the top. So we are now inheriting from a parent, and just like we said, we're going to have a list of orders. Now, kind of mentioned this before, it doesn't have to be a list. It can be any C# collection. That's the interface I collection. So all collections implement I collection. So this is more flexible than saying it has to be a list. But it doesn't know what order is. So, well, let's create order. Let's add another class. Let's save this. Add another class. And to save time, I'm going to copy and paste. Of course, if you're following along, you're going to have to pause the video often to kind of bring this in. I will explain as I go. Entity Framework is going to use this order ID and make a primary key out of it. Of course, we have a date property that is a date time. We have a user ID, right? This is the one side of the relationship. Every order has one user, right? So this is how we're going to bring in both a navigation property and a foreign key property. So these are two properties that'll help us navigate through the user's properties and link to their relational database tables using the ID. Each order is also going to have an amount, and the order has a list of order items. So as we just kind of do this quickly, we need to create the order item class. Of course, I could probably control dot this and generate class order item inside of the models. And that should work for us. And again, you know, you're going to be referencing your UML. You could see that there's an order ID, there's a product, so there's going to be, again, there's going to be navigation properties and foreign key properties, a quantity and a price kind of thing. So here we go. Now, of course, all the data types, decimals for our price. It doesn't know what product it is. Control dot, generate type product, generate a class in a new file, public class product. That's looking good. Let's open up product, and let's bring in all of the properties for product. Again, reference your UML diagram. Product for me has a category, it has a collection of order items, has a collection of ingredients, of product ingredients. Category ID, again, foreign key property versus the navigation property. How many are in stock? What's the product price? What's the product description? Of course, the question mark makes it nullable. So whether you want that nullable or not, that's up to you. But that's what that question mark is going to do. We do not have category. Let's create category, control dot, generate category in a new file, and open that up. Category is pretty simple. Again, the only table that doesn't have a primary key, I'll point this out. Notice every table has a primary key, except for application user, because we are inheriting from identity user, which is where that primary key exists. So, you know, all of our models have to have that ID property for that primary key. Okay, so category has a category ID, that's a primary key. Of course, over here, then in the product table, this is your foreign key, right? So product, if I look at product, has a foreign key of category ID. Okay, so anytime you have a foreign key, you also have the navigation property. So that's product, that's your category, category name, and a collection of products. And we're flying right through. So we've got application user, we've got order, order item, we've got product, we have category. All that's left is product ingredient and ingredient. So if I go back to product, you can see that's not happy yet because I don't have a product ingredient. Now product ingredient is that join table. And I've done this different ways in the past. With Entity Framework, it's really flexible on how, there's three different methods for working with Entity Framework, and you could do things by convention, or you could basically do things more explicitly. So here I'm very explicitly coding this join table, which I've done it kind of different ways. I've landed on liking this way the most, just very explicitly saying that this is the table name that I want, and these are the foreign key values that I want. And so product ingredient has a product ID, which is a foreign key, and an ingredient ID, which is a foreign key. And then again, navigation properties for those types. All that's left is creating the ingredient, and the ingredient has a list of product ingredients. So really quickly, that's how we're going to do code first Entity Framework, by creating our C# classes first. And by creating all of these models and linking them together in this way, I've not only created the structure for a table, like an order table that has a primary key and a foreign key value, and a collection of order items. And so each order will have a collection of order items, and so another one-to-many relationship on the other side. So there we go. That's kind of where we're at now. Just to boot this up, I guess I could have done that. Haven't really changed a whole lot, just have created some classes. So this is really just template code, but it doesn't hurt to boot it up and see that what it looks like kind of out of the box, so that as we make changes, we know that we're the one to essentially break it. Now, again, what's nice with spinning the project up this way is that there's a built-in login system. I'm not going to create a user just yet, because I want to make a few more changes before I do that. And I think now is probably the time to do that. Let me close all of that and stop the application from running. Now, to get the identity system to play nice with our new application user, we're going to have to take a couple of steps and identity DB context, but also we're going to use this generic and say of type application user. We might have to bring in the models folder up top to be recognized. Okay, so that's one step to get our identity system to recognize our class that's inheriting from identity user. We have to change that here and in one more place. And just to show, like right now, I believe if you were to spin this up by making this change, I got to this point here. No, it's not breaking just yet, but nonetheless, we're going to continue with making that change. We're going to go to under views, under shared, under login. We want to change our sign-in manager to be application user. And same thing with our user manager. Okay. Now that should be what we need to keep things from breaking as we made that one change to the identity system. So, okay, back to the process at hand, which is creating the database. Let's go ahead and do that. So, in our DB context file, we need to specify our tables. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tables. And the way that we code that is by having a DB set with the entity type product and the table name, and then get set, this is a property. Okay, so we're creating a products table. In our database, we're creating categories, orders, order items, ingredients, and product ingredients. So these are the tables. And we want to explicitly create this join table and its relationships properly. So I believe this is what's referred to as the Fluent API. We're going to do a little bit of coding, and I'll explain it as I get there, and then we're going to have some seed data. So we're going to add a method, protected override void on model creating. Model builder, model builder. Okay, now it really just put that in there for me. I think that's going to wind up being right. So GitHub Copilot is probably looking at the code that I've already written in another project, or maybe, anyways, let's close this extra curly that I've created, and I'm going to rebuild and apply. Let's take a look at this. All these 3 lines are doing, this is what I've seen before. So this is, I was expecting to get to this point, which means we probably have to change that, update the template code in at least one more place. What this is doing is we're saying, hey, product ingredient, that's our join table, has a key that is combined up of these 2 foreign keys. So the primary key is the product ID and the ingredient ID together. And that product ingredient has one product with many product ingredients. Again, this is the Fluent API, has foreign key, product ingredient, PI, product ID, and it's the same thing with the other table. So again, this is creating that join table and its relationships. Again, kind of going back to the UML, really what this is doing. If you look here, these two columns together are a compound primary key. So both of them together make the unique value for the product ingredient table. So again, primary keys are uniqueness in the table, as well as at the same time being foreign keys. And so this is a little bit unique in that it's a compound primary key made up of two different foreign keys, and that's all these three lines are doing. And so that's creating those relationships in the same method. So if I were to kind of like a composite key is the correct term. I think I used compound key, a composite key. And I would just say relationships between all these different tables. The next thing I'm going to do is add in some seed data. Now, I can seed some of these. For example, I can seed like products, and I can seed ingredients, and I can seed categories. I can seed product ingredients. I can seed these tables down here. Application user, I'm going to use by actually registering a user. So I don't want to seed an application user. Therefore, I'm not going to seed any orders. I'm going to actually create a web application for a user to create orders. And therefore, I'm also not going to seed order items. So I'm going to kind of seed these tables down here to kind of set me up to be able to create an application to do the rest of using the application to insert and update and delete data. So it makes sense then. I always like to start kind of with the more simple tables, like category is a pretty simple table. And it has no dependencies. Like you can create a category without any foreign keys, right? So the first seed data I'll do is, we'll call this model builder. Model builder, copy, paste, 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 paste. Okay, whatever. It's just your variable name, builder, model builder. So here's our different categories. And again, I'm kind of just mocking up a restaurant here. And our categories of food would be appetizer, entree, side dish, dessert, or beverage. So those are going to be the categories of food. And next thing to do would be our ingredient table. And, I'm just whipping together like all we're going to sell is tacos, right? So we're going to have beef tacos, chicken tacos, and fish tacos. So those are some ingredients, as well as the tortilla shell, lettuce, and tomato. So we're only going soft tacos here, right? That's the only choice, right? Let's then seed some products. Okay, now the products have some foreign keys, right? So we're going to say, hey, our product has data. Product ID of 1, primary key, is a beef taco. Might as well add the word a delicious beef taco, a delicious chicken taco, and a delicious fish taco. Okay, so we got 3 tacos. And the category ID of 2 means what? It means it's an entree, right? Our tacos are all entrees. They have a price, so that's $2.50. The M is there, obviously, for compiling into a decimal, right? So we're converting like floats into decimal. Here, we're going to have 100 of them in stock. Chicken tacos, we'll have 101 chicken tacos in stock. And fish tacos, we're going to have 90 in stock. So different prices, different stocks. They're all entrees. Okay, but for right now, I'll just start up with those 3 products in our restaurant. And the last thing to do, and I'll explain all of this, is to wire up our products to their ingredients. And so let me start with the first one. I'll code the first one, and then I'll copy and paste. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to say basically a beef taco is a product. Okay, I want to say a beef taco has beef, tortilla, lettuce, and tomato. And then I want to say a chicken taco has chicken, tortilla, lettuce, and tomato. I want to say a fish taco has fish, tortilla, lettuce, and tomato. And you do that just by using the keys. And so we will say new product ingredient, product ID of 1, which is beef taco, has an ingredient ID of 1, which is beef. Then we also want to say that our beef taco, product ID of 1, has a tortilla, which is an ingredient ID of 4. We want to say that our beef taco has an ingredient ID of 5, which is our lettuce. And last but not least, we need tomato for our beef taco. Okay, so this one product has these 4 ingredients. Okay, then you just have to rinse and repeat for the next 2 products. And this is just the seed data that I'm starting out with. So I'll paste in all the other product ingredients. Then I'm going to create. And if you followed me along with the first one, it should make sense for the second one and the third one. And that's where we will add all of these products to their ingredients. Okay, the next thing I want to fix is it does say that no service for user manager, right? So no service, meaning we need to update our program CS. We need to update our services. Okay, so let's update program CS, and we need to change the service that we're passing in. Basically, we're going to wind up changing, I believe, line 13 to use our new application user. So right here, builder, services, add default identity. Identity user needs to be updated here to application user. It's going to add a using statement for the models up at the top and save that. See if that makes it happy. Okay, now we're back to ground zero. So again, when you add that that child of the identity user class, when you added this application user and you want to use that, you kind of had to update the templated code in a few locations. Now we're ready to create our database. I'm going to close all tabs. Okay, and most likely, sometimes I code perfectly, many times I don't. To create the database now, we are going to add a migration. And we might get a build error. I guess we could always do a build first here, just to make sure that no errors are jumping out at us. And I'll just call this initial or init, kind of a standard name for the first migration that you add. And what the migration does is it's going to actually create some tables that we defined here in our application context. And so it's always a good idea to kind of glance at the different tables that you're creating. Keep in mind there's a primary key that's labeled as identity. It starts off at a 1 and increments by 1. And like the name is not nullable, so kind of required. So it's a good idea. There's your primary key. Constraint on all these tables. So there's all these tables. There's products. And it's a good idea to just look at it and make sure nothing jumps out at you. After you create all these tables, then we start doing an insert operation. And then we do some indexes, which you might be familiar with what an index is, but that's going to help us kind of look up information based on primary keys, like you're indexing your primary key columns. So if you look up a user by their ID, the database looks that user up pretty fast. So there we go. The init looks pretty good. So we created the migration, and You can kind of see the file there. And let's do an update database. And see if that errors out. That's a lot of scrolling text. But no errors, all looking good. So let's open up our Object Explorer and see that we have both created our database, Tequila's Restaurant DB, and inside of there, we should be left with all of our identity tables, including our new tables, which includes categories, ingredients, order items, orders, products, ingredients, and products. So if we kind of glance at any one of these, we should be able to view the data. Remember, this is our join table, and that's exactly what I would expect to see. We don't have any orders yet, but we should have some products. There we go, beef and chicken and fish taco. And so that was the objective here, was to create the database, create the code first models, and then use those models to implement our database that match our UML diagram that was brainstormed from ChatGPT. So that's where we're going to pick up next time, where we can actually start building this web application. And yeah, we will continue. I guess the last thing I'll do before I cut this off, just to demonstrate that this works, let me register maybe a Gmail. And again, this is all templated, how this works out of the box. But there we do see that the user was created. We don't have, again, this is why I like this, but this is gonna, this system, as we expand on this, it'll be able to send an email to verify the user. And of course, who doesn't want to have that in their user system? But for now, we haven't configured that. Normally this would be emailed, but for now, just confirm your account. And so thank you for confirming. And I should be able to log in, of course, if I provide a bad password. This is the benefit of using all of this. And it says, welcome my user account. I can log out. And I don't have any orders yet, so we're not going to see that application user table. But if I go into my ASP.NET users now, I can see that my user has been created in the database. Awesome. So that was a good stopping point.